Stupid. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Crizzy Books. I'm Crizzy, or Criz, but only my homeboys call me Criz. If you don't already know, it's the end of the year. 2024 is coming to a close. I've already made 2 lists of both the worst books that I read and every book that I think was absolutely perfect. So 5-star books. If you haven't seen those, go ahead and check them out if you're interested. I'm going to keep making lists until I can no longer make any more. I love making lists. I love watching lists. I love seeing what other people read throughout the year. It's so much fun. I just like to see what everybody liked and didn't like. It's also great content. Today I want to go through my top 10 sci-fi books that I read this year. I love science fiction. It's one of my favorite genres, but I also just haven't read a ton of it. So this year I really tried to focus on reading more from the genre, reading stuff that people say are staples, and then also kind of branching out and just finding things that I think scratch my niche itch when it comes to sci-fi. I read a total of 12 sci-fi, I guess what I would classify as sci-fi books this year. So this list wasn't that hard to make, but I think out of everything I read, I enjoyed most of it. I don't think that there was anything that was like, this is terrible. Let's just get into this list, shall we? So starting off at number 10, we have Parasite Eve. This is probably the most sciencey of all the science fiction that I read this year. If you're not familiar, Parasite Eve was a video game for the PlayStation back in the 90s. That video game is actually a sequel to this book, which I didn't know when I read it. I thought it was like an adaptation or, you know, this is what inspired the game or something. So that was really interesting. This is pretty good. Again, very science heavy, especially like medical science. There's a lot about like cancer and surgery, and it goes really in depth. But what I will say is that none of that stuff ever bored me. It never slowed me down or anything like that. Just know that like the action is very slow burn. It takes a while to get to things. You could classify this one as sci-fi horror easily. I think it falls into both categories, and there's some pretty like disturbing things that happen in this. So if you like your sci-fi with a little bit of like bio horror, I would check out Parasite Eve. It's not bad. At number 9, we have Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. This is the first Arthur C. Clarke book that I have ever read. Obviously I know of like some of his work through movies like 2001, but I had heard that this is really good. People really like this. It's a first contact novel. There's talks of like a movie maybe being in development for it. So a lot of these things kind of piqued my interest, and it was pretty good. Not like totally in love with it. Can't say that it's like amazing or anything, but I thought that it was a really interesting story. This one is not so much about the characters, but more about the exploration of this. No spoilers here, but this book is about a giant spaceship, space station that's ancient, showing up in our solar system, and humans go to investigate and try and find the creators and inhabitants of said space station. And it's just all about that, of them trying to understand and explore this giant space station, which they call Rama, and trying to find the Ramans who live on it. And I just thought that it was a pretty good science fiction story. It's pretty more on the sciencey side in a lot of ways, but I think that it's still very interesting and intriguing, and I really liked the ending. I thought it was pretty great. Up next at number 8, we have the cyberpunk classic Snow Crash. I'm a big fan of the cyberpunk genre. I love the video game. After playing that game, I was really interested in reading, you know, what's the inspiration for this stuff. So I read Neuromancer last year, didn't really like it. Read Snow Crash this year, liked it a little more. Still can't say that I love this one, but I think that it is so interesting the way in which it's like predicted so much about modern society, and like this potential future is like unbelievably prophetic in a lot of what it does. It's also very action heavy, which is fun. It's a very fun book, while also not being a very fun book at the same time. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it's just got this weird balance of like very exciting action with not exciting at all. stuff happening. I liked it when it was fun and having a good time, but then it bogs itself down with some other things. That was just what I thought. If you like cyberpunk, definitely check it out. I mean, this is where a ton of inspiration comes from. Up next at number 7, we have A Scanner Darkly. Philip K. Dick. I read my first PKD book last year with Ubik, and I love Ubik. That is one of my favorite books I've ever read. So this year I was determined I got to read more of this guy. I read 3 different PKD books this year, and I liked each of them very much. I think A Scanner Darkly was probably the weakest one for me. I wasn't as into this narrative and like following around drug addicts, although this book is so interesting in the way that it's written and the way that you kind of perceive this story through these characters, and I think it does a really good job of like putting you in the mindset of a drug addict, and just the weird conversations that happen between the main character and his friends and all the things that they do, all of their behavior and actions. It's a really interesting story and just further like cements PKD as being one of my favorite authors. After this year, I can confidently say that he is. But this was, this being the second one that I had read, I was just like still just very blown away at the way in which he can kind of make reading more of an experience than just like some kind of form of entertainment that I'm consuming. Like I feel like something's happening to me while I'm reading, which is really crazy. And speaking of Philip K. Dick, look who it is here at number 6 as well. We have Flowy Tears, The Policeman Said. This book was trippy as hell. Very, very fun. Very fast paced. I mean, when I talk about page turner, out of all the books that I read this year, this one had my attention. Like I was reading so much of it. I finished this way quicker than most books of this length because it just held my... it just had me. I was just in it. And I thought that this story was so interesting. It's a science fiction narrative, but it also is this mystery. You're wondering what has happened to this main character. What is this place? All of these characters and all the suspicion and this giant police state that he's in. And it's all so encapsulating. I really, really liked this story. However, unfortunately, I think that it didn't quite stick the landing, and the back third gets a little trippy, which is great, and I love the weirdness of it, but it also kind of lost me, and I was a little confused by some of the plot points, so that's why it's lower. If the ending had been just a little bit better, I think that this would have been a lot higher. At number 5, some people would probably argue that this book isn't science fiction, that it's more of a dystopian. But I don't care. I'm going to lump it in here. I think that there are sci-fi aspects to this world that this character is in, so I'm going to count it. And I kind of lump dystopia and science fiction to the same, sphere. So get over it. At number 5, we have The Running Man by Richard Bachman / Stephen King. This was a lot of fun. The premise being there is a game show called The Running Man where you are being tracked down and chased, and you are free to go for about 3 days and go wherever you want and try to prevent yourself from being caught. The public can call you out. There are trackers on the show who are incredible professionals who track down everybody. Nobody's ever won this game before. And so our main character is trying to do that to help his family out and to get himself out of poverty. It's really action-packed. It goes at lightning speed. It honestly felt very different from a lot of what Stephen King writes because this one was very action thrilling, less about the characters, more about what the characters are doing kind of story, which I thought was a cool change of pace. At number 4, we have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I feel like I've been kind of unnecessarily trashing this book, which I don't think is very fair because I have it at number 4 on my list. This book, despite itself, ended up being a pretty good time. There's so much about it that I think I don't like that I would say is stupid or doesn't make any sense or is just incredibly convenient. The characters sometimes feel like they have a lot of depth, but then they also feel incredibly flat. It's just kind of this unbalanced mess. But what this book is about and what ends up happening in it and really the ending of it. All of those things combined, I was able to forgive all of those things just because of that. I was able to say, okay, well, I guess this book kind of justifies its own plot. And then with the ending, I thought the ending was great, but maybe not for the reasons that Blake Crouch intended them to be. I found the ending to be incredibly horrific. This book is partially a horror book because of some of the things that happen and the implications of what happens to some of these characters at the end. So for those reasons, I actually really enjoyed it. I gave this thing a pretty high rating. I don't know if that's on purpose. I've read other Blake Crouch books. I am not so sure. But for whatever reason, I think Dark Matter works. At number 3, this is a very recent read for me. I read it about a week or two ago, but I really liked it. And I get the hype. One of those all-time classics. Everybody's got to read it, right? Fahrenheit 451. This is a dystopia where books are not allowed. You can't have books. Our main character is what they call a fireman. He burns books. I'm not spoiling anything. This is what the book is about. I really liked this world. Again, we are talking about a dystopian future that feels a little too close to now. And I know that people have said that about this book, and I feel like they've been saying it for a long time. But reading it through today's lens, literally like today, right now, it feels so insanely like there's just certain, even just objects in this book that you can just immediately go, oh, that's that. That is that. Or the way in which people behave and a lot of the things that it talks about in terms of like what society has become, how like individual thought and all those things is just really kind of a no-no. We don't really want people doing those. Just worry about being happy, right? Yeah, I really like this. I haven't done a review for this yet, so, but I thought that it was fantastic. Again, totally understand the hype and, you know, the prestige that it holds. It deserves it. I think it's really great. At number 2, we have the second book of The Expanse. I finally got around to reading it, Calibans War. I read the first, I've seen the show, so I kind of already know what happens in these books. But because I love the show so much, I had to read the books. I read the first one last year, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing. I'm not very good at reading series, so it takes me a while to get through things like this, especially when it's like 8 books long, and they're all like 600, 700, 800 pages long. It's going to take me a while to get through this. But I read the second one, and I gotta say, it may not be as good as the first one, but it's damn close. I thought this one was really good. It introduced some new characters. I mean, not new to me. I've seen the show. I know who these people are, but it's still nice to be getting them. It gives you different aspects other than just this crew or Miller, who I desperately wish was still around. You get a more political side of things in this one. You get more of a military aspect from Bobby. You get the botanist and getting his kind of like normal guy thrown into this crazy situation perspective. It's really cool. And I think, again, it does a very good job of just bringing, you know, stuff from the last book into this, but then also like this is its own thing. And now we're kind of also set up for the next one. I'm more excited to read the third one now than I think I was to read this one. Yeah, this is just so far an incredibly solid series. I'm really enjoying it. And at number 1, my favorite sci-fi book that I read this year, it's Mr. Philip K. Dick. Once again, for the third time on this list, we have Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I am a very big fan of Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. I think they are incredible movies. I think what they have done for the sci-fi genre is just amazing. So I had to read this. And I was blown away at how much I loved it because I wasn't sure that I was going to. Not that I don't have faith in Dick, but man, it's just such a very original and philosophical at times. PKD just has this way of like introducing very strange concepts and weird ideas and making them work and making them interesting. We already have this very interesting narrative plot that's going on. And then here's this other thing on top of it. Let me just sprinkle this weirdness into here, and it just works out. I love the bizarreness of a lot of what happens in his books, and I think this one is no exception. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was great. And I love that it doesn't at all change my opinion of the movies or anything like that. I think that the movies have taken this story and done something similar but different with them. And this book exists on its own, and I don't really view them as being the same thing. Such a fun, weird little sci-fi book. But there you have it. That was 2024 in science fiction for me. A lot of great stuff. A lot of stuff I really love. Some new all-timers on here, for sure. But how about you? What was your favorite sci-fi book that you read in 2024? Be sure to tell me in the comments below. Go ahead and give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and as always, thank you for watching. Bye.